Well, hi, I'm back, and I'm hoping that my broadcast will not be failing at this point. I am really looking forward to this conversation with my very favorite author in the world, my darling niece, Katie, who I'm hoping will join us here shortly for this live broadcast. We are going to be doing this for the first time, and so I'm afraid there may be some technical glitches along the way. We've been kind of working them out just prior to this broadcast here. So if you're out there and watching with us, bear with us, and thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for thinking about being a part of this discussion. I am looking forward to reading your comments. And Michaela, I see that you're with us. Thank you so much for joining us. I think you'll really enjoy getting to know my niece, Katie. I find her to be fascinating, and her writing is beautiful, and she's very thoughtful. And so I'm really hopeful that it'll be a conversation that you will enjoy sharing with us. Just invited her to join us, and hopefully we'll be able to do this. Good, there you are.
I'm sorry. We'll get
Okay, I am going to turn you up so that I can hear you better.
Okay.
For some reason, you are very quiet.
Oh, I do have a headset right here if we need it.
See what that does for you. Yeah,
Okay.
that might help. Okay. Michaela, how is the sound for you? Are you hearing me vocally all right? And how about the sound quality for Katie? Jan, hi Jan.
Oh, yay. Is that any better, Aunt Becky?
I don't know why it's so soft at my end, but if everyone can hear you, then I guess that's really what matters. I'll just have to listen carefully.
Still quiet?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, maybe I'm holding it in a bad way. I'm sorry, I know that makes me horizontal. Maybe I can do this.
How about, what if you just turned up your volume?
Okay. Is that better? Or, oh, they hear Katie very well.
Okay, and now I hear you. I don't know what you just did, but now your sound just boosted.
I just unplugged my headphone actually. So let's do that. And then, okay, so we won't do headphones.
Okay, good. That works. All right, well, now that we've worked that out, hello.
Okay. Hello.
Here we are.
How are you today?
Oh my gosh, I'm so glad. I anytime I do these technical things, I always kind of cross my fingers or go back to being my old Catholic self and think, oh gosh, I just hope it all goes well, because it's always a crapshoot. Things are always changing. Systems always need updating,
Yes.
You know the drill. Totally. And I was honestly, I just have to say that I am happy that I was here before you, because usually it's your generation that is like head and shoulders ahead of us in figuring all this stuff out. So you're making me feel good about it.
Yeah, I'm glad you were first too. I'm not very good at Facebook. I have to say, I don't know what it is. Like different forms of social media feel intuitive and some don't. And I think I get behind on updates or something with Facebook. And so I'm glad you figured it out. I'm glad you were first. Thank you.
No, I think you're right. I think Instagram tends to be more intuitive. Facebook seems to kind of lag behind that way. But here we are.
Here we are.
I'm so glad. I'm so glad that we're going to be able to do this talk. First of all, I just want to tell my people who are out there and watching thank you, and I want to tell them how special you are. I am so excited about all of the affirmation that you're getting for all the hard work that you've put in over the years toward your craft, your creative, expressive efforts are really being well met. And if for those of you who don't know Katie, she has written a debut collection of short fiction, and the title of it is Equipoise, which I love that word. I had to look it up. It actually is a word. But it was shortlisted for the 2018 Harper Collins UBC Prize for Best New Fiction. Pretty cool. And received a 2019 Canada Council for the Arts Award. The stories within the collection were awarded the 2018 Peter Hinchcliffe Short Fiction Award and the 2019 Exile Carter V. Cooper, that's a mouthful, Short Fiction Award. A second story by Katie was also shortlisted by the prize. So a couple of the stories were recognized individually. That's pretty amazing. And were publisher nominated for the 2019 Writers Trust Journey Prize and a 2021 and 2022 National Magazine Award. She's currently at work on her first novel with a 2021 grant from the Canada Council for the Arts. So, wow. Just,
Thanks.
wow. I mean, that is just so, how does that feel? Tell me how that feels.
It feels really, really good. Yeah, it feels just wonderful to, I think the most important part of all that is that my stories are being read and talked about. And I'm just really learning as the book gets out in the world how wonderful it is to be on the receiving end of writing. So I've been on the receiving end of reading my whole life because I love to read and I read all the time. And you know, I've told writers that I love their work, or I've really sat with books and like really integrated them and thought about them. And now I'm on this other side of it as well, where people are reaching out to me and talking to me about the stories and thinking about the characters. And there's so much joy in that. I wonder if it's the similar thing with paintings, when people come in and look at your paintings and have an actual dialogue with the art itself, and you feel like, wow, this is why I do it. Like when you're alone in your studio or your office or wherever you're working, you're with those characters, I'm with that story, and we have our own relationship. But I'm learning that that relationship isn't truly complete until it actually goes out into the world and these characters' lives become fully whole and actualized by living in the minds of people who just read the story.
Yeah. I think there's a real similar phenomenon that I've felt with people who really connect with my work. And, you know, I've literally had people create stories in which my paintings are characters. And
oh wow,
oh my gosh, it's like,
yeah,
I think that's taking it to an extreme, right? But it's still so incredibly meaningful that my work could inhabit a storyline in their lives, or that my work might, or more often, bring them joy, you know, in some way. They associate it with something positive, either through the imagery, you know, perhaps like say they love sunflowers and they bought a sunflower painting from me, and every time they see it, they're reminded of how much they love sunflowers. Sometimes I think people connect with me personally, and there's an aspect of that too, where they feel connected to me. I know, like my mom, you know, she has my paintings and she sees them and she feels connected to me. Maybe your mom too, you know?
yeah.
Yes. And that's wonderful. That's legitimate. There's nothing, there's nothing bad about that in any way. I think when I was closeted as an artist, when I was just quietly doing my thing and not telling anyone, I really robbed myself of that part of the satisfaction in the creative.
Yeah.
I think it is when you share it, and there's some risk involved in that, right?
Yeah.
I likened it to a naked beauty contest. I mean, like where you're like, you literally are bearing it all. And there's a risk that it won't be well received. And so a lot of people forego that, don't you think, out of fear?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah, I think so. I think you have to be really ready. You have to feel like the piece is really ready, and that whatever it experiences out there, you've done your very best. There's no, there's still risk in how it could be perceived, but there's not a risk that you haven't done something to prepare it. That's as much control as I think I can have, is when I get to the moment with a story where I think, now the next best thing for this story is to go out into the world, then I feel a certain confidence that it will go out there and it can be interpreted however it needs to be. I loved you shared that William Golding quote with me.
Yeah, I'll read it. I think it's
Please do.
I think it's really apropos. I'll read it for all of you who are watching with us. This is a quote from William Golding, who is the author of The Lord of the Flies. And Lord of the Flies was, it's a pretty, there's a lot to that story. And he was asked about when others greet his work with interpretations and ascribe meaning to his work. And he answered, he said, there are various interpretations of the story, Lord of the Flies again. I'm not going to choose between those interpretations. Make your own choice. The various explanations contradict one another. The only interpretation of the story that matters is your own. The only thing that matters is first the experience of being in the story and moving through it. Then any interpretation you like, if it's yours, then that's the right one. What's in a book is not what the author put into it, but only what you get out of it. So I think that's kind of what you're talking about. I've been so amazingly moved, like when people will look at a piece of my work, especially some of my more abstract work, which is a little bit more open to interpretation, and they come at the interpretation and they ascribe meaning to it that after literally hours and hours and hours and hours and sometimes years of working on a piece, I never saw that. And all of a sudden they see something there that I've never seen before. And it's like, oh, that is just so cool. Have your stories, I will say this, I mean, for those of you who haven't read her stories, I would call them sort of vignettes, where you take a moment, you take some characters, you look at it, and I would say that you generally look at things with a tenderness that I really appreciate. And you leave a little bit of ambiguity there. I don't feel like you spell it out entirely. So I would maybe characterize it in artistic terms as maybe semi-abstract, in that there's a little bit of reality and something to hang on to there, but there's a lot of room for interpretation. Have you had people come at you with like interpretations of your stories that like were new and cool for you?
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm having an audio thing. Is it back to you?
No, it might be having to do with your Wi-Fi connection. You're a little bit.
I'm a little bit delayed.
A little bit like delayed, just a little glitchy. You were better where you were before for me. Did you move because it was a problem?
No, it just all of a sudden started overlapping.
Oh, weird.
Just gonna plug in for a second. I'm just gonna see if that changes it. Oh shoot. I'm sorry, Aunt Becky. It's like, you hear me better now?
I do.
It's playing back like what we said maybe 20 seconds ago to me. Like it's a really long delay. Should I
Where's
go
your
out and come
modem?
back in?
Where's your modem?
It's right below, like right here.
Oh, so you're about as close as you can get. Huh. That's weird.
I had a little pop-up come on about sorry, it's so weird because I'm hearing like what we said 20 seconds ago.
Yeah.
Should I go out and come back in, do you think?
Maybe try go out and come back in. Yeah. See if that works.
Okay. Okay.
Sorry, everybody. We'll see what we can do here. I'll invite her again. Well, Dick, I want to say hey to you. And Kayla, how sweet to see that you're out there with us. Kathy and Diane and Jan again. And Katie, there you are. We'll see.
Okay. Okay, now it's fine.
Okay. Reboot, right? Isn't
Okay.
that how you solve everything in the computer world?
Oh gosh. I just have to hold it. For some reason it's not happy over there, but that's okay.
Okay.
And your question is fresh in my head. And yes, I have had people come up and have an idea of how a story might continue on afterwards. And I've had a couple people say like, I wanted the story to keep going. Like what happens next? And, you know, why did you end right there? And to me, the stories, I love what you just said about them being slightly realist and slightly abstract. That's something I've been trying to figure out lately, is how real do I want my stories to be? And then what am I playing with? In the fiction element, how much of that do I want to play with it, and what kind of quality do I want it to have? So I want it to be true to life. I almost want it to be more true to life, and that I hope what I can do is sketch in an invisible layer of real life. And as I'm saying this, what's popping into my head is that beautiful painting of yours of the clementine, or a tangerine, maybe a smaller orange, that I noticed and that I love. And to me, I love paintings like that, that are of something quite ordinary, that you maybe wouldn't necessarily consider to be worthy of a portrait or a full, like taking up a full piece of art. Or do you have it there?
I do. Here, I'll show you on camera.
Awesome. Yeah. Yes. I love this so much because look how beautiful it is. And it makes me think that in my life, I'll suddenly appreciate clementines much more, and the beauty of the peel, the texture, the different lines in a segment of a clementine, the shades, all the shades there, like just a little bit of like bluish and purple in there. Like I've never looked at an orange before and seen that. And so I feel like the equivalency in my writing that I'm going for is that we will see an ordinary situation. Ordinary is different for everyone depending on your circumstances, but I think what I mean is a non-extraordinary circumstance. I don't tend to write really like dramatic, like car chase scene, or like, you know, somebody's, yeah, it's not that kind of writing. It's rather quiet moments, but you go down really deep, and in going really deep, you explore a capacity for feeling and understanding life. I hope that's what I'm going for. That's what
I got from your stories. I did. And I think you're right. I think for me, you know, when you equate it to, it's interesting that I've always loved that little painting, and I remember the moment that I did it. I was just finding a quiet moment when I was at Haley's, and all the kids and the hubbub was going on, and I just needed a moment. And I had some oranges, And
Mm-hmm.
so I just thought, okay, I'm just going to sketch this. It was in my sketchbook. It wasn't meant to be a serious painting, but for me, what I do, I'm seeking the beauty of myself,
Yes.
whatever it is.
Yeah.
I am
Yeah.
an unapologetic
Mm-hmm.
seeker and appreciator of beauty. I
Mm-hmm.
thrive on it, and it lifts my spirit.
Mm-hmm.
I try to surround myself with it. I try to cultivate an appreciation of it as much as possible, and it finds its way into my paintings without a doubt. And so when I paint something ordinary or not extraordinary,
Mm-hmm.
um,
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking for that beauty, and I feel like it's
Mm-hmm.
my job to find it.
Oh, I love that. Mm-hmm.
And to be maybe not correct. I'm not really ever
Yeah.
trying to be correct. I'm trying
Yeah.
to be appreciative of whatever
Yes.
it is that I'm seeing or conveying. And my job is not only to be an appreciator, but it's also to be an entertainer. Like, I don't want to be dull. I
Mm-hmm.
in the telling or in the appreciation of it, I
Mm-hmm.
can be wrong. I can be um,
Mm-hmm.
an exaggerator. But
Mm-hmm.
whatever story it is I'm telling about my subject, I want it to be entertaining, or at least entertaining to me.
Mm. Right. Yes. Yes. I love I love that you say your job is to find the beauty. And I think that's what I'm trying to do too. And I think it's neat. I think our art kind of meets there because um there to me life is full of beauty and human interactions are full of beauty. And I think some of my stories, the ones that I feel are really working well when I'm sitting writing them, are when I find beauty where you wouldn't necessarily expect it, both because it's a not extraordinary moment, but maybe also because it's a difficult moment, or in an unexpected person, or a character ends up having a trait that you didn't expect that they would, and it's the right thing at the right time for the other character, or you're it's a really difficult situation. Like, to be kind of specific, there's a story in the collection called Northern Tether. That's the last one.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really a story about a particular kind of sorrow. Two friends, two female friends, and one has moved on with her life and the other was not prepared for that. And she's really struggling, the protagonist, with this sadness of the loss of her friend and not fully understanding why and not being able to quite let go. And a lot of the imagery that kept coming up for me in that story was about burrowing into the earth. And it takes place in the Yukon. So there's really interesting earth to work with there,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like all the copper veins in the ground, and rock and riverbed, and the resiliency of the earth there, how hard it is to drill down. And then the main character is actually from Victoria, where in my mind, a lot of the earth is like really malleable soil. And
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
yeah. So the more that I sat with that character and the more I allowed myself to sort of fall deep into her complicated issue and her confusion, the more I could feel she was deeply sad. And yet I saw this beauty in her following it down. I think if you can really follow those difficult moments way, way down, I think there's beauty available to us. And I dig and dig for that, because it's so, I don't know, it just like fills me with this great vibrancy to just find that way down there.
Well, yeah, I can see that it is just such a passion for you. It always has been. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
trying to think about some of the questions
Mm-hmm.
that, I mean, when what does it mean to you to be a writer, to own that label? Because I've seen you and I've watched you claim that title before you ever published a story, before really the world acknowledged you in any way. You owned it, and I've admired your capacity to not require that others see you that way, but encourage them to see you that way by, first of all, legitimizing that title with your own, self effort. I'm having trouble with the words, but tell me, what, did you ever feel self-conscious? I see a lot of artists feeling self-conscious, claiming that mantle, and I want to ask you about that, because how important is it that you claim that title for yourself?
Yeah, that's a good question. And I've been thinking, I feel like maybe there's a self-identification with the writer, like my soul as a writer, and then my self out in the world as a writer. And I think from a very young age, what I felt was that I knew in my soul I was a writer, and I was very, very fortunate in that my family seemed to, you included, seemed to acknowledge this along with me so well. And, my parents just being very matter of fact along with me that, oh yes, you're writing another story. And I would create these stories and staple them together or twist tie them together, and from a very young age, from being 6 years old, and just continued to do that. And I shared a story at my book launch that I gave one of these to you at a Christmas gathering, and you read it with all pure serious devotion, like you would read any story. And to be honest, I wouldn't have expected any different. And that just shows me how lucky I was, that it was like, yes, I give my gift to you. And you are like, oh, I've received a new book for Christmas. And you read it so beautifully, and everyone listened. And that kind of thing was repeated in my life. So I think I just was extremely lucky as a child to have the people around me, and mostly the grown-ups. I think it's very important that they heard that and acknowledged that and respected that. And then as an adult, I mean, I think once I started being published and spending a lot of my time and investing in my education as a writer, I felt like I can introduce myself as a writer. If someone asks me, what is your job? I can say, I'm a writer. And that's what I say now. I'm also an editor. That's like my day job, but I usually say first, I'm a writer. And then during the day I work as an editor too, because to me, that's always what I am. So yeah, there did come a time when I felt like that was the best way to sort of clarify what my career is, which is a little bit different than the feeling inside of all along knowing just for myself that I was a writer.
Yeah, I didn't know.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I was an artist.
No.
I didn't have that same experience where creativity and even seemed like a path forward. It was something, I can remember drawing as a kid, and I was never discouraged, but I never took an art class in school.
Oh, wow.
Wow. And I think, maybe it has to do with my ethnic background, and my mother was an immigrant, and it was all about you've got to approach education as a matter of survival, because everything could be lost at any moment. That was her life experience, right? Her parents had everything pulled out from under them in midlife, and the way they survived was through education, and they saw that as, not certainly doing frivolous things like, art. It was about something that could pay your bills, and
Yeah.
pursuing a career that would do that. So it wasn't until later for me, much later, where I found that my heart would sing. I mean, literally,
Yeah.
like I just would be thrilled, like in no other way, when I would paint, and thrilled and intrigued, and I just felt as if it was a mental challenge as well as a heart thing. And for me, that's what makes it inexhaustibly wonderful, and just endlessly exciting to pursue, is that I feel mentally challenged and so fulfilled in the heart. So it took me a while, but I guess when I started working at a gallery and showing my art, it became easier for me to introduce myself as an artist. And from then on, it's just that has been, I literally changed my name. So many people knew me as Becky. That was how I operated in the world. And when I decided to define myself as a professional artist, I thought, okay, I can't, this nickname thing is just not working for me. I think I need to, just claim my real name, and just that.
I love that you did that.
And honestly, in some ways, changing of the name is a way of re-identifying yourself, right? I get that. I absolutely get that. And and so, when we get married, we do that. Just in other life instances, we might decide that, a new name fits our new identity. So so there we are. We both claimed this mantle. You early on, me a little longer.
I wonder, though, as you're talking, if some of it has to do with community, and when you find your community and other people who recognize you easily or more organically as an artist, then it becomes easier. So, when I was in the MFA program, I'm in there with other students who are writing books, and we're, editing each other's stuff, and we're taking it really seriously, and we're putting in full-time hours. And so you more easily call your peers writer, and it just feels sort of like, yes, and I'm part of this community, and this is what I am as well.
That's a really good point, because you're right. It was for me when I was in workshops and when I was in the gallery and kind of with peers, like you're mentioning, that all of a sudden I began to become more and more comfortable with that self-identification way. That's a really good observation, one I hadn't thought of before. Do you, like, when you set about looking for things to work on artistically with your writing, are you constantly collecting ideas and stories? How do you come up with your subjects? What is it? I know that for me, I'll just start it out while you think about it. I'm constantly collecting subject matter that might be a potential painting. I look everywhere at everything. Anyone who's traveled with me knows that it's such a pain sometimes to travel with me down a road, because I constantly, wait, I've got to take a picture. Wait, I got to take another picture. Martha, if you're out there, Sally Ann, I know you're watching. You've been on trips with me. You've seen me do this. I'm just constantly looking for, the world is a potential painting for me now. But I organize them into albums according to subject matter and things of that sort, so that, when and where I'm looking for something, it's at my fingertips. I just wonder how you, as a writer, might do you relate to that in any way, and how do you organize yourself and your thoughts?
Yeah, very similar, actually, because I think I'm also quite a visual person, and I love photography, and studied photography a little bit when I thought maybe I would do more like photojournalism at one point. And I think what I was doing when I was taking pictures more regularly, and I'm actually starting to get back into it now, which is great, is zooming in on a place or a moment that can then be kind of exploded. And we were talking about this a little bit the other day, and you used a perfect word, which was extraction, and that when you are moving through the world with an intent to create art, you extract quite a bit from what's around you. And I do the same sometimes with a visual moment, like I'll see a place and I'm quite interested in place, and I write a lot about place in my writing, and all of the stories in Equipoise are very place-based. Place is almost like another character in the stories. I'm very interested in recording place that has made an impression on me for whatever reason, like Sleeping Bear Dunes up near Manistee is in one of the stories. And what a place, like how can you be in that place and not recreate it, whether through photography, painting, or story writing, right? Like it's just unlike anywhere else. It's so amazing. The colors are so vivid, the contrast, the sensation of the heat and the sand and the incline of the cliffs, and just like, gosh, Lake Michigan is so powerful. So I'll be in a place and I just simply have to write about it. And often my stories will be that I just want to enter into that place and record it and bring it back in my mind. And so I start writing. But of course, a story can't be just a place. You need characters to act and speak. So then to bring in character, I intentionally go in with an idea of unraveling a very complicated knot that I've come across in life that could be like a conflict or a question or an unresolved issue in my life or in life in general that I see, but something that is really sticky for me and that I've spent quite a lot of time thinking about and feeling, because the more time I've spent with it, the more angles I've seen it from, the more layers I've burrow down into it, the more accurately I can start to represent it. But it's sort of like this ball of energy or something, and then it needs to be carried forward by a person. So then I need the character to come in, and I don't know where they come from, because I don't try to write about real people, because I'm pretty private myself, and so I think I don't want to borrow too much from any one real person, because I just really want my characters to be purely fictional. So I have a place, I have a knot, and then the longer I spend in their writing, so this is like maybe in a page or two, someone comes in, someone belongs in that place, someone has claimed this issue. And then my job is really just to allow that character to speak and have their story unfold. And it's tricky to both be in that moment of allowing it to unfold and then having the editorial voice come in and say, but it needs shape and the reader is going to expect something here. So so you need this to happen now, and then you need this to happen now. And it's always faster than I think. I could write really rambly prose. And I think that's something I improved upon by practicing short story, is condense and really make those stories efficient. So don't take 3 pages what you could do in 3 sentences.
Yeah.
So that's sort of where they start. But then I have a question for you, if I can.
Sure.
Okay.
Sure.
Because that makes me think of the question I have for you around how you travel across canvas or paper when you're drawing or painting. Because with the story, it's very linear. We have a timeline. And yes, in the timeline, you might start in the narrative present, move along to the next moment, move along, and then go back into backstory and come back to narrative present. But there's still a timeline, and you could always plot a story out on a timeline. And you're also moving in a linear way across the page as a writer. So there's something very linear about writing. But what do you do with painting? Where do you start and where do you move to in a page? Do you
Well,
start in the middle?
it's an interesting question. I don't know if it's like a geometric point in space. I think it's more conceptual. And I would say, I hearken back to what you talked about, where you began with place. A lot of times you began with place. Well, you know, when I'm painting a landscape or on location, when I travel and I paint my travels, that's very much about place. And a lot of times I'll pick a spot at that place, maybe a character, right? A character of sorts, that to me epitomizes the place, or is in some way epitomizes a moment in that place, or somehow brings to life an emotion that I felt in that place. Sometimes I'll draw from a couple of photo references and pull them together and put them in that place because they're telling a story. As visual artists, we often tell stories. You know, we do, and whether or not we're conscious of it, we tell stories by virtue of the color story that we're telling. Colors have emotional content. I mean, if everything is black, there's emotional content there. If everything is red, there's going to be more passion, and you know, we have a connotation attached to that. Sunny yellow colors are going to have another connotation. So we are storytellers, whether or not we're conscious of it. And I think as far as how I move through a painting, I move using the elements of, I create movement using the elements of design. You know, I tell my students all the time, if there's a line, the eye has to follow it. It's a rule. It's just a visual rule. And likewise, the edges of shapes can become lines that point you visually. Usually, if we're doing a good job of organizing the canvas and the structure of our paintings, we're using all of these tricks to point you to the focal point, which is, you know, going to have the best lighting, the most contrast, the most unique colors, the most detail. I mean, think about how do you, okay, if you illustrate a focal point, a climax of sorts in your stories, I mean, are you using any of these tricks of the trade? You know, are there equivalencies in writing?
Yeah, I think this is so fascinating. I wanna like unlock this because I feel like maybe I'll write better climaxes if I understand visual focal points better. Okay, so it's the place where your eye wants to go and you have more detail. I think the other day you said more contrast, perhaps, between the colors.
Absolutely. And value.
So I think that, okay. I
Most
think that
dark and
might
light
be,
there.
right. Yes, that's it. Exactly. So when you say that, then I understand how they're the same. For me, a successful climactic moment is when you have followed down into the darkness so much that it suddenly is light. So the dark and the light are suddenly side by side. Yeah. And you've been led there all along, right? Everything is leading you to this moment.
Yeah.
If it's not, if a scene is not leading you, even very indirectly and mysteriously to the climax, then it shouldn't be in the story, in my opinion. And so that would be the same as the lines always leading you there. And then in that moment, in that climactic moment, yes, you have to be so precise. And in my writing, what I try to be precise about is feeling. So it can be really easy to say someone felt sad or angry or even, you know, frustrated. But I think the best and most precise emotional moments are when you can hold the light and the dark of that precise emotional moment at the same time and it feels real. That's what I'm going for too, is that it's not like oh, this creates a really strong dramatic effect. That's not particularly successful for me, although for some writers that would be what they're going for, but not for me. What I'm going for is it's so true. It feels so honest. It feels more real than real. It feels like you've suddenly uncovered a new layer of realness because you've been able to hold in the same hand the dark and the light of that moment. I
That's
think
beautiful. I love that word picture you just painted. I do that really speaks to me, that you can
well,
hold light
that's
and
great.
dark in your hand at the same time. Yeah,
Yeah, I don't think I could have got there without focal point lessons. So thank you.
oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. Yeah, we could talk about this stuff all day and just geek out. I'm
Yeah.
so happy that there are a few people out there who might be interested in geeking.
Kicking out with us.
I,
When you mentioned it the other day, focal point, I was like, oh, there's something in there I need to learn more. And I mean, I'm sure there's more and more to uncover, but I was like, that's a really, and I don't, it's funny, I don't think I've ever sat down to examine what makes a successful climax for my stories. I've just known when I need to get there, and I've followed the characters, asking them, or not asking them, but just letting them sort of shape what needs to happen. So I haven't thought, step back as an artist and consider, like, could you be a little bit more precise here? Could you, is there room for more contrast here? Are you really painting in all the details? And I do often talk in kind of painterly terms to myself when I'm editing, and I'll say, this needs to be sketched in, this needs another brush stroke, this needs, and that, when I am editing the writers that I work with, I say that to them. You've got to think about this as a painting or a photograph or a play on stage. And where's the lighting? Where's the camera? What's the angle? What's the detail over here you haven't sketched in? Is this the right color over here? Because color, I think, how you were talking about it with emotional resonance, it's the same in story. You're sort of painting with emotion, so you're getting across the visuals by conveying emotion through character, and it has the same effect, I think, as choosing a particular shade of color.
I've had a couple things come to mind as you were talking. In painting terms, in order to help a focal point become more climactic, what we often do is we have to subordinate other parts of the painting.
Oh,
And
wow.
we'll
Yeah.
do that with leaving things a little fuzzier, a little less, a little less spelled out. The edges are softer. The colors might be more um, close, more closely
Yeah.
related. There's not as much contrast, all the less detail in these, and then bam, in that focal area,
Yeah.
you really bring it all together, and it's enhanced by the fact that other portions of the paintings have been subdued. The
Yeah.
other thing that came up for me when you were talking was the idea of a theatrical analogy. And I say this all the time, you think about in the theater, on the stage, okay? And it's the costume designer and the director have all set the stage for you to take part in this visual story as well as
Yeah.
this auditory story. And what they do so frequently is they spotlight the star. It gets the best lighting, right? So there's most light shown on them. They are generally somewhere close to center stage, as a rule. They may be a little to the left, a little to the right, but usually they're more towards the middle. They're going to have probably the most remarkable costume. Somehow it's going to be set apart from the rest of the players. And everybody can't be shouting at once, or else you wouldn't you wouldn't hear what the star had to say. So they have to be somewhat subdued sometimes, you know, for the star to shine. All of these theatrical analogies, I think, are, you were kind of alluding to them, but they sort of are in keeping with a lot of what we're talking about here, I think.
Yeah, that's so interesting. It's like you need really good control on that focal point or that climactic moment, because it really is probably the moment with the most emotional impact for the viewer or the reader. And for me, what I'm really going for is engagement. I'm not necessarily going for entertainment or yeah, what I want is to engage. And so I think that climactic moment is the most sort of intense engagement. But you really have to control all the stuff leading up to it. And you're right, it's like your hands on the dial all the time, like just like amping up, like start out subdued and then like, yeah, you're on the right track. And then like, yeah, that's
got to tone you down. You're making too
yeah,
much
right.
noise over there in the corner. Yeah, I totally relate to that. I totally relate to that. Let's talk a little bit about the topic of our art and our creative life as our job or as work. And I know that was something that you had mentioned that you wanted to kind of talk about.
Yeah.
The artistic career versus the non-artistic career. You're kind of juggling both now, right? Do you consider editing an artistic thing, though?
No, I don't. Although I think you could, but just personally, I think I don't, because I separate. Why do I do that? I'm editing manuscripts, novel manuscripts. So I'm a freelance editor and I work for an editing company. And I'm also an editor for a literary magazine in San Francisco. So I consider that different than my creative work, because I think I have a different sort of attention that I'm tuning into then. And I'm a little bit like clinical about it, which has helped my writing quite a lot, quite a lot. I actually started writing a new novel, the novel I'm working on now, last summer. And it was the first time I started a story in which I could more readily move out of the creating, drafting part of my brain, where I was just sort of filtering in. I started with a place. I had a real specific place in mind. Character came in. There was a problem presented. I was following that along. And then it was like my editorial brain said, what would you tell one of your clients right now? Stop writing about this and start the action. This character needs to speak now. So that was great, because it allowed me to like more efficiently create an arc. So arc is something that I really struggled with. And I think arc is sort of what we're talking about. Would you agree in terms of the movement from the more subdued along a line, a focal point line, into the to the focal point? Sorry, I said that wrong. Along all the lines and all the colors leading to the focal point. So that movement in story would be called the narrative arc.
I think I would characterize it in painting terms as the development of the painting.
Okay. Okay.
Because, you know, like I'll start with an intention or an idea.
Right.
And I get into the painting and it goes in a totally different direction. And that frequently happens. It's like you can go in with a plan and it's sort of a guideline of sorts, but I always give myself permission to divert from the plan. And
good.
Painting takes me, because that intuitive voice within me is usually right. I mean, it's usually a a more creative voice. And, you know, for me, I feel that the creative process is a divine thing. I,
Mhm.
I feel that when I'm really in the state of flow, where
Mhm.
all systems are firing and I'm almost like riding a wave. And a lot of times
Yeah.
in that zone, I can't even tell you what I just did. Like
Mhm.
I'm just going from decision to decision to decision. And
Yeah.
sometimes I'll look back and I'll literally have to make myself take notes because I know
Mm.
I won't remember what the heck I.
Right.
And as a teacher,
Yeah.
that's not necessarily a good thing because sometimes I
Right.
want to be able to tell people, you know, how I got from point A to point,
Mm.
right? Um,
Right.
but yeah, that process of drawing on intuition and developing a painting, it's not linear for me. It's more kind of all encompassing, almost like sculpting more, you know,
Yes.
like I'm just kind of moving around and moving around. I'm making color trails. I'm making, um, you know, compositional changes. There's just so much that goes into it, but I do feel like it's not linear. It's more a development that feels more sculptural
Yeah.
to me.
Oh, I love that. I really love that. I actually think that is very similar and probably better. Like, I think if I can carry in my mind that I'm developing a narrative arc, that will create a more successful arc, because I do often feel I think of sculpting too when I'm writing, especially when I've created a lot of raw material and I don't exactly know where I'm going with it or what's most important to follow, or
Yeah.
even what the real story is.
Mhm.
Then I have all this material, and I think of it as sculpting when I think this scene doesn't need to be there.
Chop away
Yeah.
at it a little bit.
Yes. This needs more stability. This needs some more weight. This needs we need to turn a corner here. So yes, I I agree with that totally.
I have another
Yeah.
question
I think
that came
it's
up when you
yeah, go ahead.
finish your thought, and then I just have another question.
I'm just thinking if it'll be really neat after this conversation for me to go into looking at the story as overlaying development with arc and having a clear idea of arc, which is kind of a big thing for me because I really have struggled with structure and plot and arc. And I still sort of shy away from the word plot. I don't love plot driven fiction, and I feel like it can get formulaic or predictable. So I really pull away from that. And we'll have to come back to talk about intuition too if we have time, because that's the main drive for me is intuition.
Mm-hmm.
But I have also learned through my editing job that if an arc is not airtight, the story really falls. And so, and yet I think if the arc is too tight, the story can also fall flat. So I really like what you said. I'm going to carry that forward. It's like develop the arc. And in my mind, what I'm doing is suddenly not seeing the arc as two-dimensional, but I'm suddenly seeing it as three-dimensional. So instead of creating like the Aristotelian, you know, inverted check mark that we see all the time with plot graphs, now suddenly I'm seeing that what I need to do is create like a mountain, which I think will help
Good.
a
Well,
lot.
I'm so glad you feel like that's like
Yeah.
a helpful thought for you. That's
Yeah.
really cool. Talk about that
Mm.
intuition piece. What was it that
Mm.
you were thinking about there?
I really agree with you. I think that when I'm following story, I'm following intuition. So I'm not trying to say, part of me is saying a certain literary element should occur here. Like we do need to have a change occur. Usually that's what it is. But what that specific change is, I can only get to it if I can connect with my intuition. So I think a lot of the sort of exercise that goes into my writing in terms of like if you do lift weights so that you develop your bicep, the
Mm-hmm.
weights that I'm lifting to develop my writing muscle are listening to my intuition both inside and outside of my writing,
Mm.
really listening to that inner voice and honoring it, I guess, just letting it be heard when it needs to be heard.
I think you're good at that. I find you to be very thoughtful and um, I just have always admired your capacity to be in tune with where you're at emotionally. I think the more we can live consciously
Mm-hmm.
and the more we can operate consciously, the better we
Mm-hmm.
do anything we do.
Yeah.
So if
Mm-hmm.
we art consciously, if we converse consciously, if we eat
Mm-hmm.
consciously, I mean, all of those things I think
Yeah.
are definitely improved with
Mm-hmm.
a better self-awareness, a better
Yeah.
connection to that inner place within us.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, definitely, definitely.
Yeah.
And now I'm forgetting the question that I had for you. But it's been great. It's been so fun. I could
Yeah.
talk about all of this business. Is there any other topic that you wanted for us to cover while we were talking together? Because I was just going to be following up with that question, and I should have written it down when I had it in my head.
I think that we've covered so much, and I almost feel I'm at that place of like, I'm so excited to carry forward what you've shared with me and let this like grow my practice. So I feel good. I feel like this, we can end here if you like, but if you have another question, that's fine too.
I think where I was going was something along the lines of, what does your day job, how does your day job inform um, your creative practice? And I think for me, I would
Mm-hmm.
consider my day job, my commissions, and
Mm-hmm.
my
Right.
teaching, maybe my teaching,
Yes.
more my day job. But
Yeah.
I find them both satisfying in their own way,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Yeah.
require creativity of me for sure, especially,
Mm-hmm.
trying to figure out, how best to meet the intention of my clients who want to come to me for a commission, and how best to meet my individual students where they are, and to
Mm-hmm.
try to encourage and feed them. I mean, that takes a whole lot of creativity, but at the same time, my students and what I do with them makes me much more conscious of my own work too, because I hear myself saying things to them and I think, well, dang, I should be doing that too, like it's practice what you
Yes.
preach, right?
Yeah. Uh-huh.
So
Totally. Oh, I'm glad you, yeah.
I was
I'm
just,
glad you brought that up because now I remember that was a question I was going to ask you, is what's the relationship between your teaching life
mm,
and your commissions? I mean, with your commissions, is it slightly different between commissions and teaching? Because teaching is a different sort of action. You're speaking with students and are you painting as well while you teach, or are you
I
sort of moving
do.
around the room?
I do, but
Yeah.
I'm mostly running around the room because
Okay.
I'm really
Yeah.
trying to just be of service in the context
Mm-hmm.
of teaching. There's
Mm-hmm.
a lot of preparatory work. I mean, hours and hours and hours and hours of preparatory
Yeah.
work, because generally I like to have painted the painting that I'm teaching, or
Mm-hmm. Right.
similar, being a little ahead down the road. It helps me break it down for my students and turn it into steps for them,
Yeah.
um,
Right. Mm-hmm.
and so I feel like I'm a better teacher when I've made those hours of preparation in advance of a class, and
Yeah.
kind of set the stage for them to be comfortable and know know how to go, what to do, and all of that.
Yeah.
I just thought
Mm-hmm.
of another question though.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that we share a passion as well. And neither one, I identify as a musician, kind of, kind of, I mean, like, but it's certainly, well, I don't even know why I say that. I identify as a musician. I do. It's just that, it's not, where my primary focus is. But I have seen so many correlations between music and painting. And now we're seeing correlation, between you and I, between writing and painting. What correlation do you see between music and what you do? That was my question.
That's a great question. And it's cool because a lot of like my experience with music, my foundation in music is singing with you and Uncle Paul and Odie and everybody in our family. So it's really neat. Like, I think that's where my love of music comes from, is that it's something we do together, and we have a particular sound when we come together that is just a feeling of love in our family that I love so much. And I play a lot, and I love to sing still. I find it really a kind of therapeutic feeling. I feel like when you're singing, it like massages you on the inside, it's this like great.
Especially when there's harmony.
Yes. Then it's magic.
It is
magic.
magic.
Oh my gosh.
It is magic.
You know what? That's what it makes me think, where there's one similarity. I would have to keep thinking a lot, and it'd be really cool to have a conversation like this with a musician as well, like a painter, a writer, and a musician. That'd be really neat.
I agree.
But just one thing that's coming to me in this moment is that the tightness of a harmony might relate to the tightness of a juxtaposition, or like a contrast. So when you have juxtaposing emotional shades in a moment, the tighter they can be, I think the more energy there is and clarity.
Yeah.
And
the more
I think that happens.
The more relief when there's resolution too.
Yes, totally. Yes, because you hit that harmony vocally with someone and you're sitting together and you hear it. So you contribute your sound, they contribute their sound. It meets in the middle and sort of braids in the air into this brand new sound. And there's this wonderful feeling of like, we are making this. And we're not making it by hitting the same note. We're making it by hitting notes that are different enough and yet similar enough that they create this beautiful energy. And it is like, I remember sitting and singing with you and Connie in Manistee one of the times we were there, doing some tighter harmonies. And I have it on my phone, and sometimes I'll play it and I'll think, wow, what a beautiful like closeness that we reach there. I should send it to you so you can hear it again. Yeah, it's really neat. It's that idea of like sound coming together, but those sounds have their own emotional resonance. And I think that's how I would translate it to writing, is like the emotional resonance that you're trying to capture with just the right combination of words at just the right time in just the right place. And then like, it's not enough to hit one. You've got to get the one that you think wouldn't go, but it does, and it comes together and it creates this like charged emotional resonance.
Yeah, I think in music theory, it would be like going from a seventh to a whole chord, where you've got a little bit of edge and then it resolves and it's like, oh. But when we were recording with our band, and we did a CD, and I was in the editing process, I was really struck by a few things. One of them was this idea that if you repeat something, it never should be exactly the same.
Right.
right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So like if you have a chorus, every time you come around to the chorus, it needs to be slightly different. And that's so applicable to painting because, you know, I'm always advocating that if you're going to repeat something, make sure that you do it slightly different every time so that you're not visually boring. That's like the cardinal sin of art is to be dull, right?
Yeah.
You can be wrong, you can be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, a little off, you can
Mm-hmm.
be way off, but
Mm-hmm.
don't be dull. And
Mm-mm.
and
Mm-hmm.
music, you know, I liken it a lot of times to, you know, if you hit the same note over and over again without any variation of volume or without any variation in rhythm,
No.
it takes just a few times and you're annoyed. You're not just
Yes.
you're not just bored, you're actually annoyed. And so like when you're
Yes.
painting a fence, you know, be thinking about that. You know, every fence post should not be the same. There should be
Yeah. Right. Yeah.
little variations of hue or whatever to
Yes.
make it more interesting and avoid that
Mm-hmm.
kind of trap. And climax in a song, you know,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's,
Yep.
there usually needs to be a moment somewhere
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
you
Mm-hmm.
know is the apex of the song, and
Mm-hmm.
it's usually unique. It's somewhere around that
Mm-hmm.
bridge that never gets repeated,
Yep.
right? It's
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it really, it's like
That's so cool.
there's a lot of similarity within the musical realm
Yeah.
too. And so it's like within the arts, I think it's just kind
Yeah.
of a cool thought to be looking for the things that unite
Yes.
us. What are the principles that guide all of us? They're there. I
Yeah.
think they're there.
Yes.
And,
Mm-hmm.
they're
Yes.
so we
I
probably
think so
touched on a
too.
few of them here today, but I'm sure there's a great more that we could mine in terms of depth. Um,
Yeah. I wonder if there's anyone out there doing that. Maybe there's like books about this where people have cross-examined different kinds of art and like um I think it's interesting. I keep thinking the principles that govern the the rules of like successful art, like how if it actually affects someone. So what is it that the reader or listener or viewer is trying to get out of it? What's their experience? And I think the more that I can create things with the reader in mind from the beginning, the more I seem to it sort of guides me in a really good way because I think, what do I want to give my reader here? This, and I don't want it to be too direct. I want them to be engaged, so I can't hand them material. They have to just be invited into this story and allowed to live inside this story. And I think it's the same with music, and I think probably painting too, where it's like you make room for the other person to come in and really be moved
be invited.
and kind of look around, ask question.
Yeah,
Yeah, they want to get in there, I think, and connect.
be
Yeah.
invitational. Well,
Mm-hmm.
I feel like we have covered so many great topics today. I I love you so much, and I want to encourage anyone who has been watching to check out your book. I think you'll enjoy the stories. They are invitational. I found myself. I'll just tell you this quick story. Paul and I were on the road, and normally we're in the plane when we're going places, but this one time we had to drive, and we entertained ourselves with reading aloud your stories to one another while we were driving.
That's
And
great.
and it invariably happened that when we got to the end of a story, we just kind of went, ah. And and or there would be a moment in the story that I would just have to stop when I was reading it and say, that is just beautiful. And Paul would say this. He said, "You're right. That was really good." Um, So we're so
That's
proud of
great.
you. And I, for one, I mean, I'm no literary critic. I love you and I would love anything you did, but I, I will say that it is remarkable for me to stop like that and to just remark at the beauty of the words and the word pictures that you painted. And I'm not at all surprised that your stories have been so well received. And I just wish you every success. The story, for those of you who are watching, is Equipoise, and it's available on Amazon. I'll make sure that there's a link when I post this video. And
Great.
I can't wait to read what you're writing next. Can you can you hint at it for us? Like, can you give us like a little sneak peek? Is there something you can tease us with?
Well, I can tell you actually that I'm working on 2 novels, which wasn't my intention, but I started a short story while I was working on a novel, and one of the short stories grew into a novel. So I'm working on 2 novels, but I can tell you that one of them is actually a continuation of the story that is the title story of Equipoise. So in Equipoise, there's 10 stories, and one of them is called Equipoise. And I was not finished with that group of characters, and so that has developed into a full novel. So that's one of them.
Well,
Yeah.
cool. That's cool. There it is. A little sneak preview of what's to come.
Yeah.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
Is there anything
Well,
you'd like to share before we sign off?
yeah, I just want to say that I'm so grateful to you for your support and inspiration all along. And you truly have always just been an incredible aunt to me, and always been a good listener and wanted to hear what I had to say and shared your thoughts too, and took me seriously and had fun with me. And I just miss you guys so much, and I love you so much, and I'm so proud of all you're doing too.
Thank
It's
you, honey.
so awesome to talk to you now as grown-up artists together. It's amazing. Thank you so much for organizing this. I really appreciate it.
Oh, it's my pleasure. You know, it's been a privilege to watch you grow and to share your life. There's not that many people we get to share our entire lives with, right? I mean, there's just so few in this transitory world in which we live, you know. It seems like most of the people in my life have been for a season. And and that it makes me sad in a way, but it's just part of life these days. So those of us who get to share lifetimes together, we're pretty much to be cherished, I think. And you are cherished. I love you dearly, and I wish you every success. Let's talk again soon, okay?
Please, yes.
Yes. Okay.
I love you too.
And to those of you who've been watching, I want to say thank you for your attentiveness. Thank you for putting up with any technical glitches we had going on here. We persevered, and I hope it was instructional for all of you, or maybe just thought-provoking. It certainly was for me. I always feel like our conversations, Katie, are very thoughtful, and I appreciate that about you. All right.
Me too. I appreciate that about you too.
Love,
Bye.
love my dear. And bye, everyone. Have a great day.
Bye, everybody.